I was 21 years old and working at one of those massive warehouses in rural Ohio. This was back in 2019. I worked the night shift, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The place was a maze of metal and boxes, but I worked in a storage section that was barely used. So I spent the entire night alone. By the second week, I started hearing someone whistling. It wasn't a song, just two notes, repeated over and over, coming from somewhere between the high shelves. I ignored it. I figured it was just the cleaning crew, or a radio left on somewhere far away. The real trouble started on Tuesday. I left my lunch on the break room table, which was always empty at that hour. When I came back, my apple had a bite taken out of it, but it wasn't a normal bite. It looked like someone had ripped half of it off with their hands, in a really brutal way. I didn't call security. I just thought, some new idiot is trying to mess with me. Out here in the suburbs, we always assume everything is a bad joke, before we accept that it's actual danger. That same night, I was organizing some boxes when I heard fast footsteps in the aisle behind me. When I turned around, the motion sensor lights at the far end of the hall went out. I yelled, "Very funny, man. I have to finish my work." No one answered, just the silence of the warehouse. Around 4 in the morning, the PA system made a loud, clicking sound. Over the speakers, a man's voice, very calm, said my car's license plate number and the color of it. Then he let out a short little laugh and clicked off. My stomach dropped. How did he know which car was mine? The parking lot had hundreds of vehicles. I went straight to the manager's office, but the hallway door was locked. That never happens. I tried using my radio, but all I got was static. I was isolated at the back of Sector 4. I decided to leave. I grabbed my stuff and headed for the emergency exit. That's when I saw him. At the end of the main hallway, under a dim yellow light, there was a guy standing in the company uniform. He wasn't moving and was holding a handheld scanner. But when I looked at his face, I almost fell backward. His face had nothing. No nose, no mouth. It was just stretched skin. In place of his eyes, there were just two deep black holes, like someone had ripped his eyes out. He started coming toward me, but he wasn't walking normally. He was taking long strides, almost lunging, and he was slamming that handheld scanner against the metal shelves with a lot of force. Clang, clang, clang. I didn't wait. I ran for the fire exit and slammed the panic bar on the door. The alarm went off. That deafening sound filled the whole building. I sprinted through the parking lot, hopped in my car, and peeled out. The next day I went back with the police. The manager said there was no employee with that description and that the cameras in that area had stopped recording at midnight. They checked the PA system. There was no record of the microphone being used that night. The thing that keeps me awake to this day is this. The police checked the parking lot cameras. They saw me running out like a madman, but seconds before I got into my car, the footage shows the back door opening and closing on its own. I drove 30 minutes all the way home with something sitting in my back seat, and I never once looked in the rearview mirror. My name is David. I'm 42 years old, and I work as a night security guard at a logistics hub in Savannah, Georgia, near the port. My job is basically driving a patrol truck through the outdoor yard, where hundreds of shipping containers sit waiting for rail transport. It's monotonous work, surrounded by 10-foot barbed wire fences and miles of stacked metal. Most nights are quiet, almost boring. On a Thursday night last summer, the heat was suffocating. I was on my third round at about 1:40 in the morning. The yard is lit by high tower lights, but they cast deep, long shadows between the rows of containers. As I passed row 8, I slammed on the brakes. One of the doors on a refrigerated container was slightly open, and that shouldn't have happened. The steel bolt seal was dangling, but it wasn't cut. It looked like it had been melted. I got out of the truck with my flashlight. The silence in the yard was absolute, except for the ticking sound of the engine cooling down. I tried to tell myself a worker had made a mistake and left it open, but the sight of that deformed seal made my stomach tighten. I didn't want to go near it, but it was my job. So I approached the heavy metal door. The refrigeration unit was off, and a strange smell, like scrap metal mixed with rotting meat, drifted out as I got closer. As I reached for the handle, I heard a sound behind me, a dry sound, like something heavy being dragged slowly over bubble wrap. I froze, then shined my light inside the container. It was empty, except for an old wooden chair placed right in the center, and sitting in it was a man. He wasn't wearing a uniform. He had on a black suit that looked decades out of style, soaked in some dark, oily substance. His face was turned toward the wall. My hands started shaking so badly the flashlight beam wouldn't stay still. I tried to yell at him to get out, but my voice barely came out, just a weak whisper. Then the man started laughing. But it wasn't a normal laugh. It was high-pitched and distorted, like it was coming from a broken speaker. I backed away and nearly tripped over my own feet. I rushed back to the truck, grabbed the handle, and it wouldn't open. I looked through the window, and my heart dropped. Every lock was down. I had left the engine running, but now it was silent, and the keys were gone. Someone had been inside my truck and back out again in less than 30 seconds. I was locked out, surrounded by metal, with something wrong standing behind me. The man in the container began to stand. His movements were jerky, unnatural, like he didn't fully control his own body. I ran. The fear was so intense I could taste metal in my mouth. As I sprinted down the aisle, the tower lights started shutting off one by one, perfectly timed, until the yard was swallowed by darkness. I could hear footsteps on the gravel, but they weren't behind me. They were coming from above, from the tops of the containers. I reached Tower 4 and climbed the metal ladder, my hands slipping, my skin tearing as I pulled myself up. I locked myself inside the glass booth and radioed for help, my hands bleeding as I waited. When I looked down, the man in the suit was standing exactly where my truck had been, not moving, just staring up at me. That's when I realized he wasn't alone. From the shadows between the containers, more figures stepped forward, all wearing the same filthy suits, all standing perfectly still, forming a wide circle around the tower. They didn't carry weapons. They didn't speak. They just stood there watching. When the police sirens finally echoed in the distance, every single figure vanished at the same time, slipping back into the darkness in a way that didn't feel human. The police searched every inch of the yard and found nothing. The container was empty. No chair, no smell, nothing at all. What destroyed me was what they found inside my locked truck. Sitting on the dashboard was an old cassette voice recorder. When they pressed play, the sound that came out was my own voice, screaming for help. The detail that still keeps me awake is this. The recording was 10 minutes long, and it had started at the exact moment I clocked in for my shift, 2 hours before I ever found that container. I never went back to Savannah. And sometimes, I wake up in the middle of the night with the feeling that someone is still listening, still timing my screams,